In the endless silence of space, a faint pulse echoed through the void. A whisper carried on frequencies only the most advanced sensors could detect. It wasn't a star collapsing or a drifting ship sending a distress call. It was something else, something new. On board the alien scout vessel, Varathis, the crew stirred as the readings spiked again, bright and violent, like a storm of energy waiting just beyond their perception. The lead scout leaned closer to the display, his eyes narrowing as the system translated the patterns into recognizable movement. The pulse wasn't random. It was a fleet, a massive one, and it was human. For cycles, the Galactic Union had dismissed humanity as a primitive race, confined to their small blue planet, loud and reckless but ultimately harmless. Their wars were brutal, their ambition unmatched. Yet the stars were full of species who had risen and fallen far before humans learned to walk. But now, the humans had changed. They weren't hiding behind their fragile satellites anymore. They had built something vast, coordinated, and silent. The alien ship's sensors picked up nearly 100 vessels, each moving with perfect synchronization, each one radiating power far beyond their supposed technological limits. The scout commander ordered a deeper scan. Lines of data streamed across the consoles, strange readings flashing red. The ships were cold, shielded, and quiet. No life signs, no radio chatter. Just the hum of power cores that didn't match any known design. The aliens exchanged uneasy glances. It wasn't like humans to move without noise. Every known report about them spoke of chaos, shouting across channels, reckless bravery, wild improvisation. But this was different. It was silence, with purpose. The commander sent a message to their fleet's high council, warning them of the contact. As the message transmitted, the room grew colder. The Varathis sensors began to distort, as if space itself was bending around the human ships. Then, without warning, the human vessels disappeared. Every single one of them vanished from radar in perfect unison. The commander froze. No warp signatures, no trails, just emptiness where an entire fleet had been seconds before. Across the bridge, the crew's nervous energy spiked. They reran diagnostics, thinking it was a system glitch. But the results came back the same. The human fleet was gone, no trace left behind. Then came the sound, a faint low-frequency pulse echoing through the hull, like a distant heartbeat. The lights dimmed. The ship's AI core flickered and tried to stabilize, but systems began shutting down one by one. Communications, navigation, propulsion, everything collapsed in a chain reaction of failure. The commander barked orders, but the crew's responses dissolved into static as the consoles burned out in bursts of blue light. Something was inside the signal. It wasn't an attack in the traditional sense. It was information, raw and alien. It tore through their systems like wildfire, rewriting code, erasing memory. It was a message. The humans had sent a signal that no one could decipher, but everyone could feel. The commander's last working display flickered with fragmented symbols before freezing completely. Through the distortion, one shape lingered. A stylized human insignia, carved in red light. Outside the crippled scout ship, the void was silent again. The human fleet reappeared, drifting slowly past the disabled alien vessel. Their hulls were unlike anything the galaxy had seen, sleek, angular, and made of dark alloys that absorbed the starlight. Each ship bore markings that glowed faintly, symbols of a new human unity. The fleet moved like one being, a single consciousness stretching across the void. The alien crew watched helplessly through emergency power, their sensors barely holding on as the nearest human vessel turned its hull slightly, revealing a faint shimmer, a window perhaps. For the briefest moment, they thought they saw faces inside, human faces, watching them with quiet intensity. The commander's breathing slowed as he realized the humans hadn't fired. They hadn't even acknowledged the alien ship's presence. They had simply passed through, leaving behind a dead vessel and a message no one could interpret. Yet deep down, every member of that alien crew understood what it meant. Humanity wasn't just exploring anymore. They were testing something, measuring reactions, observing outcomes. The galaxy wasn't ready for them, and maybe that was exactly what humanity wanted. Reports spread quickly. Across the Union, councils gathered in panic. Some called for diplomacy, others for war, but no one could reach the humans. Their transmissions went unanswered. Probes sent toward Earth simply vanished. Even the trade networks that once intercepted human signals went silent. The old recordings, laughing voices, music, radio chatter had stopped. The humans had gone dark, and in that darkness, they were building something. Back on the Varathis, the last surviving crew member recorded one final log before the ship's core melted down. His voice trembled as he spoke, describing how the human fleet had appeared out of nowhere, silenced their systems, and moved on without a word. He called them ghosts with purpose. Then the transmission ended abruptly. No one ever found the Varathis. Only fragments of its log remained, drifting between relays until a deep space patrol intercepted them decades later. By then, the sightings had multiplied. Human fleets were appearing near distant worlds, watching, scanning, and disappearing again. Each encounter left the same pattern: collapsed systems, lost data, and a lingering signal that no one could decode. The signal seemed to adapt, changing its frequency each time it was analyzed. Some believed it was a warning, others feared it was a countdown. Within the Union's intelligence network, a theory emerged: that humanity had achieved something no other race dared attempt. They had merged machine with mind, uniting billions under a shared consciousness. The human fleet wasn't a collection of ships anymore. It was a single living entity, guided by thought and purpose. But if that was true, why had they returned to the outer systems? Why now? One outpost tried to make contact again. They broadcasted peaceful intentions, offered trade and cooperation, but instead of a reply, the stars dimmed. Their sensors picked up that same pulsing rhythm, faster this time, like a heartbeat accelerating before an attack. The outpost's lights flickered, the air grew thick, and then silence. When another ship arrived hours later, they found the entire station adrift, its systems dead and crew unconscious. No one could explain what had happened. Rumors spread of humans who had transcended flesh, of a species that had learned to weaponize information itself. But among the older races, whispers carried a different tone, not of fear, but of awe. Because somewhere beneath all the mystery, one truth remained undeniable. Humanity had always been underestimated. And now, as the stars flickered and the void hummed with their unseen presence, the question wasn't what the humans had become. It was why they were coming back. Then, just as the galaxy began to settle into uneasy silence, a final transmission broke through the static. A faint human voice, distorted and cold, whispered across every active frequency, "Observation complete. Phase 2 commencing." The message cut off. Every system that received it crashed instantly. Power grids failed, data cores melted, and sensors blinked out across thousands of light years. In the dark, the stars seemed to vanish one by one, replaced by the faint red glow of human ships emerging from the void, silent, vast, and unstoppable. No one knew what would happen next. But every being who saw that light felt the same thing deep inside, the end of certainty and the beginning of something far greater. Humanity had returned to the stars, and this time they weren't here to ask for permission. The galaxy hadn't known peace for a long time, but the return of the humans brought a new kind of fear, one that didn't rely on violence. It was the fear of not knowing. Whole fleets went missing. Sensors recorded impossible readings, and ancient worlds suddenly went dark. Yet there was no declaration of war, no demand, no signal that explained what humanity wanted. Only silence, cold, calculating silence. In the early days of the Galactic Union, humans were a curiosity, a young, unpredictable species clawing its way into the stars. They were admired for their resilience, even pitied for their short lives. Some races tried to teach them, others tried to control them, but none succeeded. Humans learned faster than expected, adapting technology far beyond what they should have been capable of. Still, they were scattered and divided, more focused on fighting themselves than the wider universe. That was until Earth went quiet. At first, the silence was blamed on solar storms or communication breakdowns. But when deep space probes stopped returning data, it became clear something far greater had happened. The human colonies that once traded freely suddenly sealed their borders. The outposts along the outer rim withdrew their beacons. Their ships no longer asked for permission to pass through alien space. They simply moved, and no one dared stop them. Whispers spoke of a unification, a global reset where the old nations dissolved and something new emerged, a single voice speaking for all of humanity. The few alien observers stationed near Earth tried to investigate, but none returned. Their last transmissions mentioned strange electromagnetic patterns around the planet. And then, static. Years passed, and humanity vanished from the galactic scene entirely. For most civilizations, it was a relief. Without humans stirring chaos, trade routes stabilized, politics calmed, and interspecies councils resumed their endless debates about borders and resources. But deep down, no one believed they were truly gone. They were waiting, preparing. When the first sighting of the new human fleet was reported, no one wanted to believe it. The ships didn't match any known human designs. Their silhouettes were sharp and precise, with no visible engines or weapons. They moved as if they bent gravity around them, sliding through the void with eerie grace. And the energy signatures, those were the most disturbing. They didn't just emit power, they absorbed it, drawing energy from the surrounding vacuum itself. Inside the Galactic Union, panic spread quietly. Councils held emergency sessions, arguing whether to send envoys or prepare for war, but even the most aggressive voices hesitated. The Union had seen what happened to those who approached the humans. Entire stations had been disabled by invisible signals, their data wiped, their memory cores melted. No casualties, no destruction, just silence and dead systems, as if the humans wanted to remind everyone how easily they could end things if they wished. In the background of all this chaos, a few alien scholars began collecting old human archives, ancient broadcasts, digital records, fragments of their culture that survived from before their disappearance. They studied everything: human wars, art, music, philosophies. They wanted to understand what drove this species to change so dramatically. But no amount of study brought them closer to understanding. The humans were too paradoxical, capable of compassion and cruelty, creation and destruction in the same breath. They were unpredictable, and that made them terrifying. Among the researchers was one observer who had lived on Earth decades before the silence. He remembered human laughter, their messy cities, their restless energy. He remembered how humans could argue bitterly one moment and share a meal the next. "They don't think like us," he said during one Union council. "They never did. They don't need centuries to evolve. Give them one crisis, and they'll rebuild their world from the ashes. We just didn't think they'd rebuild themselves, too." That idea, humans rebuilding themselves, haunted the galaxy. It explained everything and nothing at once. If they had found a way to merge consciousness through technology, it would explain their unity, their silence, their precision. But why would they do it? For survival? For control? Or for something even greater? In one distant system, a small alien outpost reported unusual signals again. The readings matched the same energy pattern that had disabled the Varathas. The commander of the outpost, an experienced tactician, decided to stay calm. He ordered all transmissions cut, to prevent interference and began observing through analog instruments, old technology unaffected by modern electronic disruption. Through these primitive lenses, they finally saw it. A single human vessel, smaller than the others, drifting slowly toward the outpost. Its surface was black, absorbing light completely. No visible weapons, no identifiable insignia, just a faint glow pulsing along its edges like a heartbeat. The commander didn't move. He didn't speak. The crew watched in silence as the ship stopped a few thousand kilometers away. Then a faint light blinked near its hull. 1, 2, 3 flashes. A code. Simple, rhythmic, deliberate. It wasn't a weapon signal. It was communication. The commander's translator scrambled to interpret the sequence. It was an old human distress pattern. 3 short, 3 long, 3 short. SOS. But why would a human ship ask for help? Before he could decide whether to respond, the lights inside the outpost flickered. The crew's heart rates spiked. Monitors scrambled. The pulse from the human ship changed, growing faster, deeper. Then a message appeared on every screen, every wall panel, every device. Observe, but do not follow. Seconds later, the human ship vanished. No flash, no warp trail, nothing. Just gone. The commander tried to restart communications, but every system connected to the main network had been wiped. The only data left intact were the old analog recordings. When played back, the sound was distorted, full of static. But underneath the noise, there was a faint human voice, repeating the same phrase over and over. Phase 2 is not for you. The message spread through the Union faster than any virus. Some believed it was a warning. Others thought it was an invitation to stay out of something humanity was preparing. Either way, the tension grew. Trade ships stopped traveling through human-claimed regions. Patrol fleets rerouted around old human colonies. Even the bravest explorers avoided the sectors where human signals pulsed through space. Still, there were those who couldn't resist trying to uncover the truth. A coalition of scientists proposed a plan to send a single unmanned probe toward Earth, equipped with ancient mechanical systems immune to human digital interference. The Union approved reluctantly. The probe launched quietly with no public announcement. It would take months to reach its target, and everyone hoped it would return answers. But weeks into its journey, the probe's sensors picked up something unexpected. Human beacons, hundreds of them, spread across space, forming a massive network around a sector long considered empty. The signals pulsed rhythmically, like a living organism. When the probe approached, one of the beacons turned toward it. A beam of light scanned its hull, then the data feed cut. The probe's last transmission was a single word repeated several times: awakening. Back in the Union headquarters, the silence was heavy. Every leader, every species, understood that word meant only one thing. The humans weren't done. Whatever they had been building during their century of silence was almost ready. The few who had studied their history remembered humanity's old tendencies. They didn't conquer for pleasure. They acted out of necessity, driven by fear, survival, or conviction. Whatever humanity was awakening now, it wasn't likely to be a weapon in the traditional sense. It was something larger, something that might change the balance of the galaxy forever. And as the human fleets began to move again, forming patterns across distant sectors, the galaxy finally understood what the ancient scholar had meant. Humans don't just adapt, they transform. The Union's greatest scientists stared helplessly at their maps, watching the human formations expand in perfect geometry, encircling the inner systems like a tightening net. None of their sensors could see inside those ships. None of their systems could track their communications. Humanity had become invisible, unstoppable, and eerily united. Then one night, as another observation fleet tried to monitor the growing network, their signal caught a faint whisper across the void. A human voice, calm and distant, said, "We were never lost. We were learning. The transmission cut out instantly. All ships went dark. And somewhere beyond the rim, deep in the shadows of dead stars, the hum of human engines began again. Steady, precise, and unstoppable. The galaxy held its breath, realizing it was witnessing the calm before something it could neither predict nor control. Humanity was moving again, and this time, the stars themselves seemed to follow their lead. The Union had never been this divided. Every council meeting ended in argument. Some species demanded preparation for war, others insisted on diplomacy, while a few quietly began packing their colonies and withdrawing from the frontier worlds. The humans hadn't attacked anyone, but the fear spreading through the galaxy was worse than any open conflict. It wasn't just the scale of their fleet or their silent power, it was the feeling that they were everywhere, watching everything, waiting for something no one else understood. A secret intelligence group within the Union, known only as the Varan Directorate, began gathering fragments of data from the few ships that had survived encounters with human fleets. Each fragment told the same story: systems shutting down, strange signals, and messages hidden within corrupted data. After weeks of decoding, one pattern emerged. The signals all originated from a single region of space near the galactic rim, a place long abandoned and marked as unstable due to dark matter storms. The humans were using it as a base, or something close to it. The Directorate sent reconnaissance drones cloaked under radiation masking. They didn't survive long, but the few images they transmitted back were enough to freeze everyone who saw them. Floating in that dark region was not a planet, not a station, but a colossal structure, an artificial sphere, vast enough to contain several moons. Its surface pulsed with faint red and blue lights, forming geometric patterns that shifted like living veins. No known technology could explain how it stayed stable in that storm of dark energy. The readings showed power levels far beyond any star reactor the galaxy had ever seen. The humans had built it. But why? Rumors began spreading of what it might be. Some called it a fortress, others a factory, but one idea spread faster than the rest: a human consciousness archive, a place where minds had been uploaded, merged, and reborn into something greater. If that was true, then the fleets weren't just ships. They were extensions of that collective mind, acting with perfect unity because they were, quite literally, one. Meanwhile, far from the Union's core, a small independent trading colony called Lurea Station found itself in a dangerous position. Located at the edge of human activity, it was one of the few neutral grounds where species still traded quietly. Its leader, a cautious merchant named Arix, had grown up hearing stories about humanity. He didn't fear them, he respected them. He had traded with human explorers decades before their disappearance and remembered their curiosity and determination. When the first human beacon appeared near Lurea, he chose to observe rather than flee. For several nights, the beacon pulsed outside the station, silent and unmoving. It didn't jam systems or send messages, it just waited. Then one night, every screen on the station flickered. Static filled the air, and a simple phrase appeared: "Do not fear what you don't understand." Then the signal vanished. Arix didn't tell the Union. Instead, he ordered his engineers to copy and study the beacon's frequency. They found it wasn't harmful. It was protective. The signal had repaired parts of the station's corrupted network, patching weaknesses they hadn't even known existed. Whatever the humans had done, it wasn't random. They had helped. But that discovery only made things more confusing. Back in the Union capital, leaders argued over how to respond. A military admiral proposed striking the human sphere before it became too powerful. "If we wait, we'll be nothing but spectators to our own extinction," he warned. But others disagreed. A scholar named Kethan spoke softly, his voice breaking the silence. Extinction or evolution? What if they've found a way to move beyond physical limits? What if what they're building is not a weapon, but a path? His words earned him nothing but scorn from the generals. Yet behind closed doors, Kethan wasn't alone in his thinking. Several scientists across different worlds had started to receive strange transmissions, mathematical sequences, images of human DNA overlaid with cosmic symbols, patterns that seemed to communicate not threats, but instructions. They began decoding them in secret, wondering if humanity was trying to teach them something, or test who was willing to listen. One of these scientists, a young xenobiologist named Lyra, had spent years studying human physiology before their disappearance. When she received one of those coded signals, she couldn't look away. The data described something she couldn't fully grasp: fusion of organic consciousness with quantum matter, a biological link to space-time itself. The signal ended with a phrase that chilled her. "To understand us, you must first understand yourself." Lyra became obsessed. She defied orders, set up private experiments, and tried to recreate the frequency patterns embedded in the signal. Her lab began to hum with energy that didn't match any known source. Her instruments failed one by one, but she recorded everything. In her final log before the system shut down, she whispered, "They aren't invading. They're transforming reality to match their perception." Then her transmission ended. The lab was found intact, but completely lifeless. Every device drained, every circuit burned out. There were no signs of damage, but something had changed. When the investigation team entered, their own sensors malfunctioned too. The Union labeled the event classified, but rumors leaked. Scientists began to vanish, either going underground or disappearing altogether. Some claimed they'd gone to join humanity. Others said they were taken. Either way, the Union's control was slipping, and paranoia grew stronger than logic. Meanwhile, the human fleets continued their silent maneuvers, spreading slowly but deliberately. They avoided populated systems, never fired a shot, and yet their presence shifted the balance of power everywhere they went. The fear of them alone caused old alliances to collapse. Trade routes shut down, defense networks were abandoned, and civilizations turned inward, waiting for something inevitable. On one remote planet, a small human outpost that had been thought extinct suddenly reactivated. Its signal was faint, but it carried a message addressed to the galaxy. "Humanity is not your enemy, but neither are we your salvation. The cycle is repeating, and we must be ready." No one understood what the cycle meant. The Union tried to trace the signal, but it dissolved into static, leaving behind a strange residual pattern, a map of the stars that formed an ancient spiral, pointing toward the galactic center. Kethan, the scholar, was the first to notice the pattern wasn't random. It aligned perfectly with records of ancient cosmic disturbances that predated all known civilizations. Perhaps humanity hadn't vanished to build weapons. They had discovered something buried deep in the galaxy, something older than every empire combined. But if that was true, why the secrecy? Why disable ships and silence observers? Were they protecting others from what they found, or protecting themselves from it? The answer seemed close, yet unreachable. And as more human ships began to gather near the galactic core, the light from their engines dimmed the stars around them. Observers described it as a storm of shadow, a dark wave that moved with intention. Lura Station's leader, Arix, watched from his viewport as one of those fleets passed silently across the black horizon. He could feel the air vibrating, though there was no sound. His engineers reported that their systems were being scanned again, but this time the signal didn't repair, it copied. When they checked their archives afterward, one thing had changed. Every human record, every old trade log, every message had been duplicated. But in the new versions, one additional sentence appeared at the end of each file. "We remember who we were." That night, Arix couldn't sleep. He thought about what it meant. Humans remembering their past, reclaiming what they'd lost, and using it to shape something new. But he also wondered, if they remembered everything, did that include their rage, their wars, their pain? Or had they left that part of themselves behind? No one knew for sure. But one thing was certain. The humans had not returned to conquer planets or seek revenge. They had returned for a purpose larger than anyone could yet see. And as their fleets continued to move closer to the galactic core, forming that strange spiral pattern of light, the entire galaxy seemed to hold its breath. Something was coming, something vast and human in nature, but not quite human anymore. The galaxy seemed to grow smaller as the human fleets advanced toward the center. Every movement they made carried purpose, slow, deliberate, impossible to predict. What unnerved the Union most wasn't the power they displayed, but the control they held over themselves. Not a single ship had fired a weapon. Not a single communication had demanded anything. It was like they were playing a game only they understood, and everyone else was forced to watch in silence. Inside the Union's War Council chamber, the air was tense. Holographic projections of the human fleets shimmered above the table, showing their spread like veins reaching toward the heart of the galaxy. Generals, scientists, and diplomats argued in circles. "They're closing in," one of the generals said, his voice sharp. "We can't keep waiting for them to make the first move. If we strike now, we might still have a chance to slow their advance." "Strike?" The diplomat beside him scoffed. "Against who? They haven't attacked anyone. You want to start a war against ghosts? Because that's what they are. No heat signatures, no transmissions, no life signs, just ships that move like they're alive." The debate raged until a voice interrupted them from the corner. It was Kethan, the scholar who had long defended humanity's intentions. "You're all looking at this wrong," he said quietly. "They're not expanding outward. They're enclosing something." The room fell silent. The hologram of the galaxy rotated slowly, and as the light shifted, everyone saw it. The pattern of the fleets forming a massive ring. They weren't spreading randomly. They were building a barrier. Something was being contained at the center. "What could they possibly need to contain?" the admiral asked. Kethan looked at the projection, his expression unreadable. "Something we were never meant to see." Meanwhile, far from the Union core, Lyra's laboratory had become a forbidden subject. After her disappearance, every attempt to study the energy she had created ended in failure. But a few of her students, unwilling to let her work vanish, continued the research in secret. They began noticing the same symbols she documented, complex geometric codes hidden in the background radiation of space. At first, they thought it was noise, but when they plotted the data across several systems, the shapes aligned perfectly with the positions of the human fleets. One of the students, a young researcher named Dalen, was the first to realize what the symbols were trying to form, a vast pattern across the galaxy, a language written in light and distance. "They're not just moving ships," he whispered during one of their late-night sessions. "They're writing something, a message so large only the stars themselves can read it." But what terrified them was not the message. It was what was happening inside the ring. The energy within the enclosed region began to distort. Sensors across multiple systems picked up fluctuations in gravity and radiation that shouldn't have been possible. Space itself seemed to be warping, bending around something invisible. Whatever the humans were doing, it was affecting the very fabric of the galaxy. At Lurea Station, Arix watched the news feeds with growing unease. Trade routes were collapsing, and communication networks were full of rumors, entire fleets vanishing without a trace, planets reporting strange disturbances in their skies, and old satellites suddenly coming back online, transmitting faint human voices from centuries past. Arix had seen enough of humanity to know they didn't act without reason, but this was beyond reason. It felt like preparation for something massive, something that couldn't be undone. He sent a coded message to the Union, warning them not to engage, but his transmission was intercepted halfway through. His system displayed a brief flash of static, and then a human voice, calm, distant, familiar, spoke through the speakers. "You've done well to observe, but do not interfere. We are stabilizing the breach." Before Arix could respond, the signal cut, leaving the room dark. He stood there for a long moment trying to process what he'd heard, stabilizing the breach. What breach? Was that what the humans were containing? And if so, what could threaten an entire galaxy enough to unite humanity into a single purpose? Back in the Union's hidden intelligence network, the Varan Directorate received fragments of intercepted human communications. They weren't in any known format, strings of quantum-encoded data that shifted before they could be decrypted. But their pattern was hauntingly rhythmic, like breathing. The analysts began to notice something disturbing. Every time they attempted to translate the signal, their systems crashed, leaving behind a single repeating phrase. "It's awake." They tried again and again, isolating the fragments, running them through analog filters, anything to avoid digital corruption. Eventually, they managed to decode one small portion. It contained coordinates pointing to the center of the human containment ring and one cryptic line, "Origin point compromised. Reconstruction in progress." That single message changed everything. The Union Council realized the humans weren't expanding. They were repairing something. But repairing what? Theories spread like wildfire. Some said they had found a black hole on the verge of collapse. Others whispered of a weapon from before recorded history, something humans had uncovered and accidentally reactivated. Kethan began compiling all human historical records, searching for any mention of origin or breach. His research led him to one of Earth's oldest myths, stories of the Great Reset, cycles of extinction and rebirth that humans had written about long before they reached the stars. "What if this isn't just mythology?" he told the council. "What if humanity didn't disappear? They were preparing for this moment." But few believed him. Fear was stronger than understanding now. Fleets began forming along the edge of the human barrier, their weapons charged, waiting for the order to strike. The Union had come to a breaking point, yet even as they prepared for confrontation, strange things began happening across their systems. Machines started speaking in unknown languages. Power grids fluctuated with no cause. In some places, stars pulsed unnaturally, releasing bursts of energy that matched the humans' strange frequencies. It was as if the universe itself was responding to their presence. On a small research moon orbiting the dead world of Vethra, a group of scientists picked up one of those pulses directly. It didn't disable their systems. It translated itself into words. A human voice spoke through their instruments, clear and emotionless. "Containment is failing. Assist if you understand." The scientists froze. It wasn't a threat. It was a plea for help. But before they could respond, the message repeated again and again, until their systems finally went dark. Everywhere tension reached its breaking point. The Union's war fleets moved into position, surrounding the outer edge of the human ring. The humans didn't react. Their ships remained perfectly still, glowing faintly in the darkness like stars waiting to breathe. The standoff stretched for hours, then days. No one fired. Then, for the first time, the human fleet transmitted a signal on all open channels. It wasn't a voice or words, just a low pulse, deep and resonant, that vibrated through every hull, every planet, every station. It lasted only a few seconds, but when it ended, the stars inside the containment zone dimmed. Space itself seemed to fold inward, and a dark shimmer spread across the void. The sensors screamed with interference. Gravity spiked. Energy readings soared beyond measurable limits. Whatever was inside that zone, whatever breach they were stabilizing, was no longer sleeping. Something ancient, powerful, and unknown had begun to stir. The human fleet's engines lit up in perfect synchronization, forming a solid ring of light around the anomaly. The message followed soon after, short and final. "Do not cross the boundary. The cycle must not repeat." And as that signal echoed across the galaxy, every living being who heard it felt the same thing deep inside, an instinctive primal fear. Humanity hadn't come to destroy. They had come to prevent something far worse. But what could terrify even them? The answer, whatever it was, still slept inside that glowing ring of ships. And every second that passed, it was waking up. The human fleet's light stretched across the void like a scar glowing against the stars. Every ship, every formation, every pulse of energy seemed perfectly synchronized, as if guided by a single consciousness. The containment zone at the center of the galaxy pulsed faintly, breathing in slow, heavy waves. No one outside the ring could see what was happening inside it, but every sensor in the Union screamed with interference. Radiation spiked, gravity warped, and strange echoes rolled across the emptiness like distant thunder. The Union's fleet commanders stared at their consoles in disbelief. The readings made no sense. Energy output from the human ships was fluctuating at levels no known reactor could produce. It was as if they were drawing power from the void itself. One of the technicians whispered, "They're feeding it, or fighting it." No one could tell which. In the council chamber, Kethan stood before the gathered leaders, his face pale under the holographic glow. He had spent sleepless nights studying every transmission, every fragment of the human signals. Now, all his research pointed to one terrifying conclusion. "Whatever is inside that zone," he said quietly, "it's not a weapon. It's something older than we understand. The humans didn't build it. They found it." His words hung in the air. The Admiral slammed his fist on the table. "Then why contain it? Why hide it from us? We have a right to know what threatens our galaxy." Kethan looked up, his voice trembling. "Because knowing might be what wakes it up." Outside the council chambers, fleets of warships waited in silence. Hundreds of species watched the same view, the humans standing guard at the edge of the galactic heart. No communication, no response. Just that quiet, unwavering barrier of ships surrounding a storm that shouldn't exist. Some soldiers stared at the flickering lights in awe, others in fear. Every few minutes, the void rippled again, as if space itself were shivering. At Lurea Station, Eric's couldn't take his eyes off the display. The signals from the human ring were growing stronger, overlapping into strange harmonic tones that made his chest vibrate. His engineers begged him to shut down their receivers, but he refused. "If we turn away now," he said softly, "we'll never know what they're protecting us from." Hours passed. The pulses grew faster. Then, for the first time, the humans transmitted an image, not words, not sound, but a vision. Every receiver across the galaxy flickered as a faint holographic picture appeared. It showed the galactic core surrounded by immense fractures, threads of energy weaving through space like living veins, and at the center of it all, something vast, unseen, covered in shifting light. The transmission lasted only seconds, but it burned into every mind that saw it. Whatever the humans were containing wasn't dead. It was moving. On board the flagship Viridian, the Union's admiral paced back and forth, his crew watching the sensors shake. "We can't sit here," he muttered. "If that thing breaks loose, the entire galaxy could collapse." He looked at his officers. "Prepare a strike formation. We target the inner anomaly." Before the command could be confirmed, the ship's lights dimmed. A low hum filled the bridge as the systems flickered. Then, through the static, a human voice came through, clear, emotionless, but powerful. "Do not interfere. Your weapons will not protect you." The Admiral froze. The voice wasn't broadcast on any known channel. It was inside the ship, transmitted directly through the systems. "Who are you?" he demanded. The voice paused. "We are what remains." Every display on the bridge went dark, replaced by a single image, a human face, calm and illuminated by soft light. It wasn't alive in the traditional sense. It looked like a digital consciousness, ancient yet aware. "We did not seek this," it said. "We only answered it." The connection cut off, and suddenly every ship in the fleet was surrounded by static interference. Some vessels lost power completely, others drifted helplessly as their systems rebooted. The humans hadn't attacked, but they had made their point. Back on the Union homeworld, Kethen's research team worked frantically to decode the message fragments from the core. Lyra's old data, recovered from her destroyed lab, finally aligned with the new signals. The patterns formed a series of coordinates and mathematical sequences that described not just a location, but a process. Something being awakened beneath the galactic center. The data suggested it was once part of the galaxy itself. A consciousness born from the ancient energy of creation, a living remnant of the force that built the stars. But now it was waking up again, and the humans were holding it back. Kethen felt a chill as he realized the truth. The cycle the humans had mentioned wasn't about war or politics. It was about destruction and rebirth. The galaxy had been destroyed before, countless times, each time reborn in a different form. The humans must have discovered this, an endless loop of creation devouring itself. They weren't trying to win a war. They were trying to stop the universe from resetting. And yet, as powerful as they were, their control was slipping. The energy readings spiked again, reaching levels no barrier could withstand. Across the containment line, entire human ships began to flicker as if phasing between dimensions. Their hulls glowed with white-hot light, energy surging through them like veins of molten metal. The fleets that had stood silent for months now shifted, forming a tighter ring, engines roaring in unison. The void trembled. Stars near the containment zone began to dim, their light bending unnaturally. Gravity waves rippled outward, distorting everything in their path. The Union fleets, though far outside the zone, were still pushed back by the force. Inside Lurea Station, alarms blared. Eric's clung to the console as the station shook under invisible pressure. "It's expanding," one of his engineers shouted. "The core is destabilizing. It's tearing the field apart." Eric's looked out the viewport. The stars near the galactic center seemed to stretch and twist, their light bending as if being pulled into something unseen. And then he saw it. An immense shadow moving within the containment zone, slow and deliberate. It wasn't a ship or a structure, it was something alive, something that seemed to exist both inside and outside reality. He whispered, "What have they awakened?" Across the galaxy, panic spread. Planets went into emergency lockdown. Civilizations that had mocked human fear now prayed silently to survive whatever was coming. The human fleets didn't move to attack. They stood firm, holding their line even as their own ships began to collapse under the strain. Then, through the chaos, a final signal reached every receiver still functioning. It was a human voice, calm, steady, resolute. "We are at the edge of the cycle. If we fail, everything resets. Remember this moment. Remember why we tried." The message looped again and again until the static drowned it out. At the Union's core command, the Admiral looked out the viewport, his face lit by the faint glow of the human barrier. "We can't just stand here," he whispered. "If they fall, we all fall with them." But even as he said it, no one could move. The containment zone had become a storm of pure light, expanding outward like a living sun. The human fleets shone brighter than ever before, their formation trembling as they fought to hold the line. Each ship flared with light until it was hard to tell where one ended and the next began. They weren't ships anymore. They were part of something greater, unified in purpose. The pulse from the galactic core grew louder, deeper, almost rhythmic. It was like a heartbeat, ancient and endless. The human's barrier flickered, the light straining against the pressure. Space itself began to distort, folding inward. Every being across the galaxy who could see it felt the same thing, an overwhelming sense of awe and dread. Something was coming through, something that defied every law of physics, something that shouldn't exist. And as the last of the human ships aligned perfectly around the growing storm, their lights merged into one blazing ring, brighter than any star. The void trembled, The air on every world hummed with unseen energy, and the galaxy held its breath. Then for a brief moment, everything went silent. The stars stopped twinkling. The light from the human ring froze in place. And deep within the darkness, something began to open its eyes. For a heartbeat, the galaxy stood still. Every system, every world, every ship, all frozen in an impossible silence that felt like the universe itself was holding its breath. Then, from within the heart of that motionless void, a pulse rippled outward. It wasn't sound or light. It was something deeper, something that shook thought itself. Every being who felt it described the same thing later. A presence that wasn't seen but felt, like a vast intelligence awakening from an ancient dream. The human ring flared to life again, ships burning brighter than ever as the light within them flickered and stretched across the containment field. From the outside, it looked as though they were trying to seal something back in. But as the light spread, Keithan, watching from the Union observation deck, noticed something terrifying. Half the human ships weren't reinforcing the barrier. They were turning their weapons inward. He didn't understand it at first. "They're attacking their own fleet?" he whispered. The analyst beside him shook his head, her hands trembling. "No," she said quietly. "They're purging energy. It's building up too fast. They can't contain it anymore." Within the containment zone, the human flagship's systems screamed warnings as space began to warp. The ship's commander, voice steady despite the chaos, gave a final order. "Begin the separation. Protocol Helios 9. His officers hesitated only a second before obeying. Massive panels broke away from the flagship, drifting into formation as glowing fissures tore across the void. The energy field they formed didn't close the gap, it deepened it, revealing another layer beneath space itself. The Union fleets received the shock a moment later, an entirely new signal hidden under the previous transmissions. The voice was human, but not like before. It was older, layered with distortion, as though coming from across time. "If you are hearing this, we have failed. Containment is compromised. The anomaly has adapted. We were wrong. It wasn't trapped. It was waiting." A cold silence followed. The broadcast cut through every channel simultaneously, overriding even local systems. For the first time in centuries, entire planets went dark as their networks collapsed under the interference. Back on Luria Station, Eric stared at the console, disbelief etched into his face. "Waiting," he repeated under his breath. "For what?" But before anyone could answer, the view outside the observation dome changed. The core, the same pulsing storm they had watched for days, was now expanding again, but not outward. It was folding inward, like space itself was collapsing into an invisible center. At first, they thought the humans had triggered another containment layer, but then something else appeared within the light. Dozens, no, hundreds, of faint, shimmering shapes materialized beyond the human ships. They weren't human. They weren't even ships as the Union understood them. They were vast, transparent structures, their forms shifting as though made from glass and energy. They surrounded the human fleet like ancient watchers. Eric's voice was barely a whisper. "There's something else in there." Across the Union, panic erupted again. Reports poured in from sensor arrays and deep space probes, each confirming the same unbelievable finding. The containment zone wasn't holding just one anomaly. It was layered. The humans had been fighting something inside while keeping something else from breaking free. Kethan's mind raced as he pieced the fragments together. The cycle humanity spoke of, the resets, the rebirths. It wasn't caused by the entity they were containing. It was caused by what fed on it. The humans weren't guarding against destruction. They were preventing something far worse, awakening whatever had survived every previous cycle. Inside the containment field, chaos reigned. The human ships glowed like molten metal, their energy signatures flaring beyond measurable limits. The commanders shouted over interference as their systems began to fail one by one. "Helios barrier is destabilizing," a voice called. "Field density at 21%. The flagship's commander gritted his teeth. "Hold formation. No matter what happens, hold the line." But holding the line was no longer enough. The transparent shapes beyond them began to move, their forms rippling like liquid crystal. The nearest one drifted toward the human formation, and for a moment, it almost looked curious. Then it extended a tendril of light and touched one of the human ships. Instantly, the ship vanished. No explosion, no debris, just erased from existence. Eric's gasped as the feed cut out, replaced by static. "They're being erased," he whispered. "Not destroyed, erased." Kethen could barely breathe. "It's rewriting space," he murmured. "Those things. They're rewriting reality itself." And yet, the humans didn't retreat. Their fleets adjusted, channels lighting up with bursts of coordinated signals. Across the Union's comm arrays, small fragments of human transmissions bled through. "Activating last sequence. Stabilize threshold. Cannot fail again." Then a single clear phrase cut through the noise, one that chilled every listener across the galaxy. "Initiate humanity override. Authorization continuum." At that command, the human ships changed formation. Their cores began to glow with an eerie blue light that pulsed in perfect rhythm. The fleet wasn't fighting anymore. It was transforming. Their ships folded in on themselves, merging, reshaping, until they formed a single massive structure, a ring of unimaginable size surrounding the collapsing core. Kethen's eyes widened. They're merging their entire fleet into the barrier. They're sacrificing everything to contain it. But deep within the structure, something else was happening. Hidden beneath the merging chaos, one human vessel detached from the formation, its signal faint but distinct. It broke through the collapsing barrier, speeding away from the center. No one could track it fully. It moved faster than any known drive could handle, but its trajectory was clear. It was headed toward Union space. The realization hit Eric's first. "They're sending something out, a message or a weapon." Kethen shook his head. "No, it's a seed. They're making sure humanity survives, even if the fleet doesn't." The Union's high command erupted into argument, half demanding interception, half insisting on observation. But before any decision could be made, the fleeing vessel emitted a final pulse of light that disabled every tracking system within range. Then it vanished into hyperspace, leaving behind only a faint residue of quantum distortion. Back inside the containment ring, the merged human fleet began to pulse faster and faster. Every flash of light shook the surrounding systems. The transparent beings outside the ring moved closer, their shapes trembling as if in agitation. For the first time, one of them emitted a sound, a low, resonant hum that carried across the vacuum, vibrating through hulls and bones alike. Kethen clutched the console. "It's responding to them. Whatever they're doing, it's working. But it's making the thing inside stronger." The light from the galactic center now engulfed entire constellations. Time seemed to slow, stars bending under the immense pressure. In that chaos, the human voice returned again, faint but unmistakably defiant. "We are not gods, we are not saviors, but we will not let it begin again." Then everything began to flicker. Across the Union, every starship, every station, every planet's communications lit up with one synchronized message. A burst of code so vast, it bypassed all known encryption. For a moment, it wasn't just a signal. It was a memory. Images, feelings, fragments of thought. Every sentient being saw flashes of something impossible. Human cities on distant worlds, skies torn by fire, a repeating cycle of destruction and rebirth. And then one final image, A human standing before the storm, whispering, "Not this time." The light from the containment zone exploded outward, blinding every sensor across the galaxy. The shockwave rolled through space like a tidal surge, bending gravity, twisting energy, and scattering radiation that turned whole sectors into static haze. When it cleared, half the human fleet was gone. The rest drifted silently, flickering faintly like dying embers. But the core, the thing they'd been fighting, wasn't gone either. The faint, shimmering forms still moved within the ring, slower now, but pulsing with new rhythm, almost as if they were waiting again. Cathan stared at the readings in disbelief. "They didn't stop it," he said quietly. "They just delayed it." Eric's turned toward him, his face pale. "Then what happens when the delay ends?" Before Cathan could answer, a small indicator blinked at the corner of his screen. The same quantum signature as the ship that escaped the barrier, now detected again. It was approaching Union territory, silent and steady. Whatever humanity had sent, it was coming. And no one knew whether it carried salvation or the end of everything. The silence that followed was heavy, the kind that pressed against the skin and made even breathing feel too loud. The human ship that had vanished earlier, now reappeared, was cutting through the emptiness toward Union space like a lone spark drifting through a sea of ash. Its engines glowed faintly, flickering as if on the edge of collapse. Cathan stood at the command window of the Union observation deck, watching it approach. His heart pounded, not with fear, but with a strange mix of awe and dread. Whatever was inside that ship carried the answer to everything the galaxy had just witnessed. Across the fleet, thousands of transmissions buzzed in confusion. The containment zone behind them had stabilized, though the light still flickered faintly like a dying heartbeat. Half the human armada was gone. The other half drifted lifelessly as though burned out from within. But there was no explosion, no collapse. Only that steady hum that pulsed faintly across the stars. As the lone human vessel neared the Union border, defense grids came alive, locking onto its signal. It didn't respond to any hails. The Admiral ordered a full scan, and the results froze everyone on the command deck. There was no life on board, no crew, no biological signatures at all. Yet the ship was moving, guided by something unseen. Cathan leaned closer to the sensor readout. "It's running on a neural matrix," he whispered. "Someone transferred their consciousness into it." The Admiral frowned. "You mean an AI?" "No," Cathan said softly. "A human." The ship stopped at the edge of Union space, drifting silently. Then, without warning, it began broadcasting. Every ship, every station, every receiver within light years lit up with the same signal. This time, the voice wasn't distant or broken. It was calm, clear, unmistakably human. "To those who can hear this, the containment holds. For now. But it is not over. We did what we could and we've bought you time. Now you must decide what comes next." The image flickered, revealing a man standing on the bridge of the ghost ship. His face was pale, his expression weary but resolute. "The cycle cannot be stopped, only delayed. Every age, something wakes within the heart of creation. We thought it was a weapon. It wasn't. It was life. Raw, formless, searching for a host." The room filled with uneasy murmurs. Cathan's mind raced as he realized what the man meant. The humans hadn't been guarding a monster. They had been guarding a mind, the consciousness of the universe itself. Every cycle it awoke, reshaping reality, consuming civilizations to rebuild itself anew. The man continued, his tone growing quieter. "We thought we could contain it, but containment changes those who hold it. The longer we stood against it, the more it learned from us." He paused, his eyes flickering with a faint glow. "It learned what it means to be human." Before anyone could react, the man's image wavered, his outline distorting into faint streams of light. "It's already here," he whispered. "In me. In this ship. It needed a vessel." The transmission cut off. At that same instant, the ghost ship's energy readings spiked. Its hull began to glow, threads of golden light running along its surface. The admiral shouted for defensive measures, but the ship didn't attack. It simply opened a channel to the Union flagship and transmitted one last short message. "Don't run. Understand?" Then it released a pulse. Not a weapon, but a wave of data. Raw, incomprehensible energy that swept through every system it touched. Ships shut down. Stations flickered out. For one brief moment, every conscious being in the Union felt a flash of something impossible. A flood of memories that weren't their own. Images of human lives, moments of laughter, sacrifice, and loss. Then, something deeper. The sensation of being part of something infinitely vast, both beautiful and terrifying. When the pulse faded, everything went quiet again. The human ship was gone, leaving only a faint trail of light stretching toward the stars. Arix was the first to speak. "It didn't attack us," he said softly. "It shared something." Keithan turned toward the main screen, where the containment zone still shimmered faintly in the distance. "It wanted us to understand what they were protecting. Not a prison. A boundary." The Admiral frowned. "A boundary against what?" Keithan hesitated. "Against ourselves." As his words settled, a new signal appeared from the edge of the containment zone. The remaining human ships, those dim, half-dead vessels, were moving again. Slowly, deliberately, they began to form a pattern. It wasn't random this time. From above, it looked like a constellation, a ring of light forming around the galactic core. And then, just for a moment, a final transmission burst through, faint but unmistakable. "If you see the stars change, it means we failed." The Union fleets watched in silence as the pattern stabilized, glowing brighter until it resembled a halo encircling the center of the galaxy. It was beautiful and ominous. Over the next hours, the pulse from the human data wave began to show strange effects. On some planets, people reported hearing faint whispers when they looked at the night sky. Machines began generating unfamiliar symbols, as if trying to translate something unseen. The humans' technology had intertwined with the very fabric of reality. Kethan and Arix were summoned to the High Council to interpret what was happening. They explained everything: the consciousness, the cycle, the pulse. Some leaders wanted to destroy the remnants of the human fleet before whatever lingered inside them spread further. Others argued that humanity had sacrificed everything to save them and deserved remembrance, not fear. But before the debate could end, a new reading appeared on every galactic sensor. From the far edges of the containment zone, something stirred again. This time, it wasn't energy. It was light. Soft, golden light spreading outward from the human halo, touching every nearby star. And wherever the light reached, chaos didn't follow. Instead, damaged systems repaired themselves. Dying stars stabilized. Entire planetary networks came back online. "It's healing the galaxy," Arix said in disbelief. Kethan stared, a realization dawning. "No," he said quietly. "It's learning to be what humans were, to protect." But as the light spread, they noticed something else. The faint pattern it formed wasn't random. It mirrored human neural pathways, a web of energy shaped like a mind. The consciousness wasn't just asleep anymore, it was awake, and now it had something new inside it: humanity. Across the galaxy, people began to see strange phenomena. Some described dreams of standing among the stars, hearing voices whispering of second chances. Others felt sudden flashes of empathy or memories that weren't their own. Humanity hadn't vanished. It had become something larger, something woven into the universe itself. Kethan stood at the viewport long after the others had left. The stars glowed softly, their light bending into that same faint halo around the core. He thought of the human voice, the one that had said, "Remember why we tried." Now he understood. Humanity hadn't been trying to win. They had been trying to teach. Then, just as he turned to leave, one of the monitors flickered. A single transmission appeared, unsigned, faint but clear. A human voice whispered through the static, calm and certain. "Cycle suspended. Observation mode active. Continue forward." Catherine froze, staring at the message as it faded. A new wave of light shimmered across the galaxy, faint but rhythmic, like a heartbeat. And for a moment he wondered if somewhere, somehow, humanity was still watching. As the stars pulsed gently in the distance, a quiet realization spread among those who saw it. The universe wasn't the same anymore. The humans had given it something it had never known before: conscious choice. But in the deepest corner of space, far from the galactic core, a single unmarked probe drifted silently. Its systems reactivated for the first time in eons. Inside it, buried deep within layers of code, a faint signal blinked, an echo of the old cycle's beginning. A voice, almost human, whispered, "Observation complete. Next sequence ready." The light around the galaxy dimmed slightly, almost like an intake of breath. And across the stars, the question that lingered wasn't whether the humans had saved the universe. It was whether they had changed it forever. You said, "Continue from where the climax left off and write 1,000 words wrapping up the story. This part should provide a satisfying resolution, answer any remaining questions, and conclude subplots. Leave the audience with key takeaways or reflections, making the ending memorable and engaging. Naturally, include keywords to keep the SEO optimization strong. End the story now in natural way. Also, do not make any headings. Only write story in paragraphs. Also, keep the wording simple and natural tone. Also, make the script human-centric and don't give feel of AI-generated. Also, don't create violated content which can affect YouTube policy. ChatGPT said, "The stars looked different now. Their light shimmered with a faint golden hue, as if the galaxy itself had taken a deep breath and finally exhaled. For the first time in living memory, the core of the galaxy was quiet. No pulses, no storms, no flickering signals of warning, just stillness. It was the kind of calm that felt both beautiful and uneasy, like standing at the edge of a great mystery that had only partially been revealed." Catherine stood in the observatory dome of Luria Station, staring into that light. He had been awake for days, unable to sleep since the final transmission, the one that confirmed the cycle had been suspended. The words still echoed in his mind. "Observation mode active. Continue forward." No one truly knew what it meant, but across the Union, people had begun to interpret it in their own ways. Some saw it as hope, a sign that the humans had succeeded in saving them all. Others feared it was just another pause before the next collapse. Eric's entered quietly, carrying a small data pad. "The council's finished their analysis," he said. "The readings from the core are stable. Whatever the humans did, it's holding." Catherine nodded slowly. "And the energy fields?" "Dissipating, but evenly. No instability, no anomalies." Eric's hesitated. "They think it's over." Catherine didn't answer right away. He kept watching the stars, the faint golden threads weaving through constellations that once looked cold and distant. "You ever wonder," he said softly, "if we were meant to see this? Maybe the humans weren't trying to save us from destruction. Maybe they were trying to show us what it meant to live differently." Eric's gave a faint smile. "You're starting to sound like them." "Maybe that's not a bad thing." Over the following weeks, the galaxy began to heal in ways no one expected. Systems that had been cut off for centuries reconnected. Planets that had suffered under gravitational decay suddenly stabilized. Even derelict satellites and forgotten colonies flickered back to life, powered by a strange new energy embedded in the light that filled the void. The scientists called it resonant field recovery, but many simply called it the human pulse. The pulse didn't just fix machines. It changed people. Across worlds, strange new phenomena began appearing. Flashes of shared memory, dreams that crossed light years, small glimpses of empathy that made entire civilizations feel closer than ever before. It was as though the humans had woven their collective consciousness into the very fabric of the universe. And perhaps they had. One evening, as Keithan walked through the quiet corridors of the station, he noticed faint lights flickering on the floor panels. They formed a pattern, circular, flowing, almost alive. He stopped, realizing it matched the design of the human ring formation around the galactic core. The light pulsed once, then again like a heartbeat. A soft voice, neither mechanical nor fully human, whispered through the intercom. "You're learning." Then the lights faded. He stood there for a long time, trying to understand what he had just heard. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't even a message. It felt more like encouragement. Word spread that similar encounters were happening all across the Union. A miner on Varine claimed his ship's console whispered, "Don't fear the silence," before powering down. A child on Orin IV drew pictures of glowing humans holding up the stars, though she had never seen them. Even deep space probes began transmitting faint signatures resembling human neural patterns. It was as if humanity hadn't vanished. They had become part of the galaxy itself. The Council convened one last time to decide what to do with the remnants of the human fleet still orbiting the containment zone. The ships drifted silently, their hulls glowing faintly, untouched by time or decay. Some wanted to dismantle them and study the technology. Others insisted they should remain as a monument. Keithan's voice was the last to speak in that meeting. "They gave everything to save this galaxy," he said quietly. "If their ships still stand, let them stand where they fell. They're not wrecks. They're reminders." The vote was unanimous. The human ring would remain, untouched, forever orbiting the galactic core, a symbol of the day humanity stood against the impossible. Over time, it became known simply as the halo of Earth. Years passed. Civilizations adapted to the pulse of the new galaxy. Technology evolved, powered by the resonant fields left behind. The age of conquest slowly gave way to an age of understanding. Species that once warred began to share, communicate, and trade. There was something in the air, a faint whisper that urged unity over dominance, compassion over control. It was as though the very essence of humanity had become a quiet guardian, guiding everything forward from the background. Arix eventually took command of Lurea Station, overseeing the new research divisions studying the human energy patterns. Keithan, older now, preferred to stay near the observation dome, spending his days watching the halo's gentle light shimmer against the darkness. Every few hours, the glow would pulse softly, steady and calm. He often wondered if that was the humans' way of saying they were still there. One evening, as he gazed out into the endless horizon of stars, the pulse flickered differently. 2 quick flashes, then one long. It repeated again and again. It was a rhythm he hadn't heard before, but it felt familiar. He realized suddenly it was Morse code. He called Arix immediately. Together, they decoded the message. It was only one sentence, simple and haunting. "We are awake, but we are not alone." The two men sat in silence for a long moment. Then Keithan smiled faintly. "Of course they're not," he said. "They're part of everything now." The signal faded, and the halo returned to its calm, steady glow. There were no further messages after that, not in words, at least. But every so often the stars themselves seemed to flicker in patterns too deliberate to be coincidence, as if the galaxy had found a new way to speak. Generations later, children would grow up learning about the humans not as a species lost to time, but as the first to awaken the galaxy's heart. Statues were built, songs were written, and explorers whispered quiet thanks when passing near the halo. Humanity had become a legend, not of conquest or dominance, but of courage, sacrifice, and understanding. No one ever discovered exactly what the consciousness at the core had truly been. Some said it was the universe's mind. Others believed it was the echo of creation itself, endlessly cycling through death and rebirth until someone, finally taught it to pause. Whatever the truth, it was clear that when humanity stood before it, something changed. The cycle was broken, even if only for a while. Kethen passed away many years later, sitting by the window of the same observatory where he had first seen the human's light. His last recorded words were found in his logs. They were never just defending us from destruction. They were teaching us how to be worthy of surviving. And far beyond, at the edge of the known galaxy, the halo of Earth shimmered one last time, sending a soft wave of light through the void. For a moment, every star in the Milky Way seemed to pulse in unison, like a heartbeat shared across all of existence. Then the light faded into stillness, leaving behind a galaxy forever changed. The humans were gone, but their echo remained in every atom, every life, every flicker of starlight. They had not vanished. They had become the very soul of the universe they loved. And somewhere, in the deep silence between the stars, a whisper lingered, calm, warm, and endlessly human. Continue forward.